I was the 16th nanny in 18 months, hired to care for a billionaire's daughter who hadn't spoken in 3 years. The job paid $100,000, enough to save my life. But when I made his traumatized child laugh for the first time, her cold-hearted father looked at me like I'd performed a miracle. That's when everything got dangerous, because falling for your boss is one thing, but falling for a man still haunting his dead wife's memory, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And when his powerful mother-in-law discovered our secret and threatened to take his daughter away, I had to make an impossible choice: stay and destroy the family I'd helped heal, or leave and break all our hearts. Joyce Adeyemi sat in the Seoul immigration office for the 3rd time that week, her phone buzzing with yet another call from the debt collector. 11 missed calls today. She let it go to voicemail again, her hands trembling as she stared at the deportation notice on the desk in front of her. 2 weeks. That's all she had left before they sent her back to Nigeria, and she'd still owe them everyone. The officer across from her spoke in rapid Korean. She barely understood, but the meaning was clear in his cold eyes. Fix this or leave. Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. A woman's voice, crisp and professional, spoke in English. We saw your application for the private nanny position. Can you come for an interview today? The address she gave made Joyce's stomach drop. Cheongdam-dong, the wealthiest neighborhood in all of Seoul. The salary the woman mentioned made her dizzy. 140 million won per year. Joyce did the math in her head 3 times because it couldn't be real. That was more money than she'd seen in her entire life combined. She arrived at the building 2 hours later, her only professional clothes slightly wrinkled from being shoved in her tiny hostel locker. The lobby alone was more expensive than anything she'd ever touched. Marble floors reflected her nervous face back at her as she rode the elevator to the 70th floor. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, she forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire Han River, the afternoon sun turning the water to liquid gold. But it was the coldness of the space that struck her most. Beautiful and utterly lifeless, like a museum after hours. A woman in her 60s, dressed in a traditional hanbok, led her through hallways lined with family photographs. The same woman appeared in every frame, her smile bright and warm, her hand always touching a small girl or the tall man beside her. Joyce's guide, who introduced herself as Mrs. Kang, said nothing about the photos, but Joyce understood. This was a home frozen in time, a shrine to someone who was gone. The man waiting in the glass-walled office didn't look up when she entered. Park Ji-hoon, the nameplate on his desk read, though she'd already researched him during the cab ride over. 36 years old, CEO of Park Industries, 3rd-generation Chaebol heir, estimated net worth somewhere in the billions. The articles called him the Ice Prince of Gangnam, and sitting across from him now, Joyce understood why. His face could have been carved from stone for all the warmth it showed. He let her sit in silence for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes before finally lifting his eyes from his tablet. Those eyes were dark, empty, the kind of emptiness that came from deliberately shutting down everything inside. He studied her the way someone might study a bug under glass, clinical and detached. 17 nannies in 18 months, he said without preamble, his English perfect, but accentless. The last one lasted 9 hours. My daughter locked her in the bathroom and called building security, claiming the woman had struck her. It was a lie, but convincing enough that the police were involved. Before that, one quit after my daughter poured milk into her laptop. Another fled after my daughter cut her own hair with kitchen scissors and blamed the nanny for it. Are you still interested? Joyce needed this job so desperately she could taste it, but something in his casual recitation of his daughter's terrorism made her pause. Why does she do it? The question seemed to surprise him. A flicker of something crossed his face, too quick to identify. Because she can. Because I'm never here. Because she knows they'll leave anyway. What happened to her mother? The silence that followed was different, heavier. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Car accident. 4 years ago. I was driving. My wife died on impact. My daughter was in the back seat. She hasn't spoken since 6 months after the accident. Joyce's breath caught. She was 2 years old, watching her mother die, and now at 6 she'd driven away 17 adults who'd tried to care for her. The psychology didn't take a degree to understand. This child was testing everyone, waiting for them to prove what she already believed, that everyone leaves eventually. Before you subscribe, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying this story of how a nanny won over a cold-hearted billionaire and his broken daughter, please hit that subscribe button. We share stories like this every week here on Afro K Chronicles, and your support means everything. Now back to Joyce and Alexander's story. Park Ji-hoon slid a contract across his glass desk. 1-week trial period. If you survive, 140 million won annually plus housing in the staff quarters. If you quit, you leave with nothing. Sign or don't. Joyce signed. She had no choice, not really, not with deportation 2 weeks away and loan sharks who'd made it very clear what happened to people who didn't pay. Mrs. Kang led her to the bedroom at the end of the hall, knocked once, received no answer, then left Joyce standing alone in the doorway. The room was aggressively pink, pristine to the point of sterility, like a display in a furniture store that no child actually lived in. The girl sat on her bed with her back to the door, hunched over a sketchbook, her pencil moving in furious strokes. "Hi, Yuna," Joyce said softly, stepping inside. "My name is Joyce. I'm from Nigeria. That's in Africa. Have you heard of it?" The pencil didn't stop moving. The small shoulders didn't shift. Joyce might as well have been talking to the wall. She moved closer, slowly, and glimpsed what Yuna was drawing. The same woman from all the photographs downstairs, rendered in a child's careful hand. The woman was crying in this picture, tears streaming down her face in blue streaks. "I'm going to be staying here for a while," Joyce continued, keeping her voice even and calm. "I'm not going to force you to talk to me or like me. But I'm also not going to leave when you try to scare me away. Fair?" Yuna turned then, just slightly, enough for Joyce to see her face in profile. She had her father's eyes, dark and assessing, ancient in a way no 6-year-old's eyes should be. They studied Joyce for a long moment, taking in everything, her second-hand clothes, her foreign face, her nervous hands. Then Yuna turned back to her drawing without a word. She was beautiful, Joyce thought. You must miss her so much. The pencil stopped. It was the smallest reaction, barely a pause, but Joyce saw it. She'd found the crack in the armor. She left the room quietly, closing the door with a soft click, and didn't see the way Yuna's hand trembled as she started drawing again. That night, Park Ji-hoon reviewed the nanny cam footage from his daughter's room, something he did obsessively with every new hire, watching for signs of cruelty or neglect or simple incompetence. He watched this new woman, this Joyce, and felt something shift in his chest. She hadn't tried to force Yuna to respond. Hadn't bribed or begged or used the bright fake voice so many others had tried. She'd just acknowledged the girl's pain and left her with it. He rewound the footage and watched it again. Day 3 brought the breakfast standoff. Joyce made jollof rice and eggs, the smell of tomatoes and peppers filling the pristine kitchen in a way Mrs. Kong clearly didn't approve of. Yuna refused to leave her room. Joyce could hear the lock click from inside when she knocked. So she did something the other 16 nannies probably hadn't thought of. She sat down on the floor outside the locked door, her back against the wall, and ate her own breakfast there. "So there was this boy in Lagos when I was 7, she said conversationally, as if Yuna were sitting right beside her instead of behind a locked door. "Every single day, he'd steal my lunch. I was smaller than him and scared, so I just let him do it. But one day, I made my rice with pepper sauce, the really hot kind that makes your eyes water. I knew he'd steal it. I wanted him to." Silence from behind the door, But Joyce sensed something shifting, attention focusing. He took a huge bite, she continued, and his face turned so red I thought he might explode. He cried for an hour. Never stole my lunch again. A sound came from behind the door. Small and quickly stifled, but definitely there. A giggle. Joyce smiled at the wall and kept eating. Day 5, a drawing appeared under Joyce's bedroom door in the staff quarters. A stick figure with dark skin and curly hair labeled Joyce in shaky English letters. Beside it, a smaller stick figure holding the first one's hand. No label on the second figure, but Joyce knew. She taped it to her wall and felt her eyes sting with tears she didn't let fall. Day 7 brought the turning point. Mrs. Kong called in sick, and Joyce realized she had no food in the house for dinner. She couldn't leave Yuna alone. The child hadn't left the penthouse in 11 months, according to Mrs. King's whispered confession. Joyce stood outside Yuna's door, weighing her options. "I need to go to the market for food," she said through the wood. "I can't leave you here alone. Want to come with me?" The lock didn't click open. Yuna appeared in the doorway so fast Joyce barely saw her move, but her face was pale with terror. The front door might as well have been the entrance to hell for how she stared at it. "What if we pretend we're spies on a secret mission?" Joyce suggested. "We have to blend in with the normal people so no one knows who we really are." She pulled out her baseball cap, placed it on Yuna's head, found her sunglasses and slid them onto the small face. Then held out her hand and waited. Yuna's fingers were ice cold when they finally gripped Joyce's palm. The traditional market was overwhelming in the best way, colors and sounds and smells crashing over them in waves. Yuna's eyes went wide, her grip on Joyce's hand tightening to almost painful, but she didn't try to run. She stared at everything, the ajamas selling vegetables and shouting prices, the fish tanks with live seafood, the steaming pots of tteokbokki and odeng. Joyce bought hotteok from a street vendor, the sweet syrup inside, still hot enough to burn. She tore it in half and offered a piece to Yuna. The smile that broke across the child's face was like sunrise. Small and tentative but real, the first genuine expression Joyce had seen from her. They walked back to the penthouse eating hotteok, and Joyce felt something warm and dangerous blooming in her chest. "Don't get attached," she told herself. "You're just the nanny. You'll leave eventually." They all do. Park Ji-hoon saw them returning through the building's security feed. He'd been checking it obsessively since realizing they'd left, ready to call his driver to go find them, his heart hammering in a way it hadn't in 4 years. But there they were, his daughter and this woman, holding hands and smiling. His daughter was smiling. He watched the footage 3 times before he could make himself look away. Day 10 shattered whatever professional distance Joyce had been trying to maintain. She woke at 3 in the morning to screaming, the kind that turned her blood to ice. She ran to Yuna's room in her sleep shirt and found the child thrashing in her bed, trapped in a nightmare, her small face contorted in terror. Joyce didn't think, just gathered her up and held her, rocking back and forth, singing a lullaby her own mother had sung in Igbo before the fire took her. She looked up to find Park Ji-hoon standing in the doorway. He slept in his office most nights according to Mrs. Kang, and he looked it now, his shirt rumpled, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. They stared at each other across the dim room, Joyce holding his daughter, both of them frozen in a moment too intimate for employer and employee. "Thank you," he whispered. "She's a good kid. Just scared. We both are." He left before Joyce could respond, and she sat there in the dark holding Yuna until dawn, feeling the walls she'd built around her own heart starting to crack. If you're falling in love with this story as much as Joyce is falling for this family, please subscribe to Afro K Chronicles. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. We bring you the most emotional romance stories every single week. Now, let's get back to the moment everything changes. Day 12 brought the meeting with Yuna's therapist. Park Ji-hoon was in Busan for business, so Joyce offered to attend alone. Dr. Shin was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put Joyce at ease. Yuna's making remarkable progress, Dr. Shin said, sliding a drawing across her desk. She drew her first picture without her mother in it. That's significant. The drawing showed two figures at a market, one tall and one small, holding hands. Joyce felt her throat tighten. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Children don't heal from pressure. They heal from presence. That night, Park Ji-hoon returned at 11 to find Joyce in the kitchen making tea, her phone in her hand, tears streaming silently down her face. She ended the call quickly when she saw him, wiping her eyes, but the damage was done. "Homesick?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I don't have a home to be sick for." The silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and charged. He poured himself tea with the awkward movements of a man who didn't know where anything was in his own kitchen, then sat across from her at the island. Up close like this, Joyce could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver starting at his temples, the exhaustion that went bone deep. Dr. Shin called. "She said you've done more for Yuna in 2 weeks than 17 nannies did in 18 months. I'm not doing anything special. Just not leaving." He studied her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Why did you come to Korea? Running from something?" "Running to something. Survival." "I know that feeling." Their eyes met and held, and Joyce felt something electric pass between them, a recognition of shared wounds and desperate hope. He was noticing things he shouldn't, the curve of her mouth, the way her accent made every word sound like music, how her presence had brought his daughter back to life and maybe, just maybe, was doing the same for him. "I should sleep," Joyce said, standing abruptly. "Yuna wakes early." She fled before he could respond, before she could do something monumentally stupid like reach for him. She lay in bed for hours, her heart racing, telling herself it meant nothing. He was her employer. She was nobody. This was temporary. All of it was temporary. Day 14, Park Ji-hoon did something unprecedented. He stayed home on a Saturday, offered to go to the market with Joyce and Yuna. Mrs. King nearly dropped her teapot when he appeared in casual clothes instead of his usual suit. The market was crowded, bodies pressing close in the narrow aisles. Yuna ran ahead to look at the fish tanks, leaving Joyce and Park Ji-hoon alone. Someone bumped Joyce from behind, hard enough that she stumbled forward directly into his chest. His hands came up automatically to steady her, catching her waist, and they froze. She could feel the warmth of his palms through her thin shirt. Could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. Could see the exact moment his pupils dilated, his breath catching. Time seemed to stop, the noise of the market fading to white noise. "Sorry, I didn't mean to," she stammered. "You don't have to apologize." He didn't let go immediately. His hands stayed on her waist, fingers pressing just slightly, and she couldn't breathe. People were staring. She could feel their eyes, a Korean man and a black woman standing too close, touching too intimately. The whispers started like rustling leaves. Park Ji-hoon noticed. His face went hard, and he pulled her closer instead of releasing her, his eyes daring anyone to say something. Ignore them. But the spell was broken. He let go. She stepped back. They didn't touch again for the rest of the market trip, but the awareness between them was suffocating. Week 3 began with a shift neither of them acknowledged but both felt. Park Ji-hoon started coming home for dinner every night. They ate together, the three of them, Joyce's fusion cooking filling the table with jollof rice and kimchi, plantains and japchae. Yuna sat between them, drawing in her sketchbook while the adults talked. He asked about Nigeria. She asked about Harvard. He told her about the pressure of inheriting an empire. She told him about raising herself after the fire. They talked until Yuna fell asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms, exhausted from a full day of living. "I've got her," Park Ji-hoon said when they both reached to carry her. "I can help." "I know you can. But let me. Please." There was something raw in his voice that made Joyce step back. She followed as he carried Yuna to bed, watched as he tucked her in with a gentleness that cracked something open in Joyce's chest. They stood in the hallway after, the space between them charged and dangerous. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You already pay me." "That's not what I mean." His hand lifted, almost touched her face, almost. Joyce forced herself to step back even though everything in her wanted to lean into that touch. "This is dangerous." "I know." Neither of them moved. Neither of them looked away. Week 4 brought the late-night tea talks that became the highlight of Park Ji-hoon's existence. After Yuna slept, he'd find Joyce in the kitchen, and they'd sit for hours talking about everything and nothing. He learned she dreamed in 3 languages. She learned he played piano but hadn't touched it since the accident. He memorized the way she laughed, bright and unguarded. She memorized the rare moments when his face softened and he looked almost happy. The night it all fell apart started like the others. Joyce was stressed baking at midnight, her hands kneading dough with barely controlled violence. The loan shark had called again. 1 week left. She had the money now from her salary, but paying them would leave her with nothing, and what if this job ended like all the others? Park Ji-hoon found her there, flour on her cheek, tears she didn't know she was crying, leaving tracks through it. "Can't sleep? Too much on my mind." He moved closer, too close, watching her hands work the dough with an intensity that made her shiver. "Talk to me. I owe people money. A lot. This job is the only thing keeping me from disappearing." He turned her around, hands on her shoulders, his face inches from hers. "I won't let that happen. You don't even know me. I know you saved my daughter. I know you make her laugh. I know you're the first person in 4 years who doesn't look at me like I'm broken." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "And I know I can't stop thinking about you. Alexander." "Joyce, he stopped, his eyes dropping to her mouth, and she knew he was going to kiss her, knew she should step back, knew this was crossing every line, but she didn't move, couldn't move, didn't want to move. If you're not already subscribed to Afro K Chronicles, now is the time. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this forbidden love story. Hit that subscribe button and let's continue. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable and catastrophic. For years of grief meeting profound loneliness, desperation, and desire colliding in the space between one heartbeat and the next. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shirt. They kissed like drowning people finding air, messy and desperate and absolutely forbidden. They broke apart, both breathing hard, both terrified. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have," he started. "Don't apologize. You work for me. This is wrong. I know. If anyone finds out, they'll destroy you. I know. We can't do this. I know." But neither of them stepped away. Neither of them could. They kissed again, slower this time, and Joyce felt herself falling into something she couldn't name, something that felt like coming home and leaping off a cliff all at once. Day 32. Madame Go-mi-young made her weekly inspection visit. Joyce met her for the first time and understood immediately why Park Ji-hoon had tensed when he saw her name on the call log. The woman was elegant in the way of old money, her hanbok traditional and expensive, her hair styled perfectly, her smile absolutely venomous. "You're the new nanny," she said in English, her eyes raking over Joyce like she was examining a stain on fine fabric. "How exotic." "Nice to meet you, ma'am," Joyce replied, keeping her voice level. "Where are you from?" "Nigeria." "How fascinating. I didn't know they exported nannies now." Park Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway, his whole body radiating tension. "Mother, Joyce is not," he started, but Madame Go cut him off with a wave. "I'm just making conversation." "So sensitive, Ji-hoon." To Joyce, "Do you have children of your own?" "No, ma'am." "Good. Then you don't know what you're doing." She turned to find Yuna hiding behind Joyce's leg, her small hands gripping Joyce's pants. "Yuna, yeah, come to Grandma." "Why are you with the help?" Yuna shook her head violently and pressed closer to Joyce. Madame Go's face hardened into something cold and ugly. "I see. We need to talk, Ji-hoon." Alone. Joyce took Yuna to her room while the adults talked, or fought, or whatever happened behind that closed office door. She could hear raised voices, Madam Go's sharp and cutting, Park Ji-hoon's low and dangerous. When Madam Go left an hour later, she looked at Joyce with such pure hatred that Joyce felt it like a physical blow. That night, Park Ji-hoon found Joyce on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. His mother-in-law had threatened immigration investigations, threatened to have Joyce's visa revoked, threatened everything short of physical violence. The message was clear. Leave or be destroyed. I'm sorry about her, he said. It's fine. I've heard worse. It's not fine. She had no right. Joyce touched his hand, a brief pressure. Alexander, I knew what I was signing up for. He laced his fingers through hers, and they stood there in the dark, holding hands like teenagers, like this simple touch wasn't the most dangerous thing either of them had ever done. I'm going to pay off your debt, he said suddenly. All of it. You don't have to worry anymore. Joyce pulled her hand away. No. Why not? Because then this becomes what she said it is. You buying me? That's not what I meant. I need to pay my own way. Do you understand? He did. He nodded. But the tenderness in his eyes was almost harder to bear than his mother-in-law's hatred. Day 35, the photograph appeared. Some tabloid had caught them at the market, holding hands with Yuna between them, looking for all the world like a family. The headline made Joyce's stomach turn. Ice Prince Park Ji-hoon's new African nanny, too close for comfort? The article was vicious. It questioned her credentials, implied she was a gold digger, suggested inappropriate behavior, hinted at sexual favors. It stopped just short of calling her a prostitute, but the implication dripped from every word. Park Ji-hoon's PR team went into crisis mode. His board called an emergency meeting. Fire her, they said. Now. This is damaging our stock price. No, Park Ji-hoon said. We're not asking. Fire her or we'll vote you out as CEO. I own 51% of the shares. You can't touch me. Your mother-in-law owns 8%. She's siding with us. That makes 49% against you. One more board member flips and you lose everything. The realization hit him like ice water. Madame Go had orchestrated this entire thing. The photograph, the article, the board revolt. She'd been planning it from the moment she saw Yuna clinging to Joyce's leg. That night, he told Joyce everything. She listened in silence, her face calm but her eyes devastated. Then fire me, she said when he finished. What? No. You'll lose your company. Yuna's inheritance. Everything your family built. I'm not worth that. You don't get to decide your worth to me. Alexander, be realistic. We've known each other 5 weeks. Your daughter's progress will last. She's healing. She'll be okay without me. And what about me? Joyce felt her heart crack open. You'll be okay too. I won't. You have to be. For her. She touched his face, memorizing the angles, the warmth, the way he leaned into her palm like a man starving for touch. I'm going to make this easy for you. I quit. Joyce, don't. I already packed. Mrs. Kong called me a cab. I'm leaving tonight while Yuna's asleep. Tell her I had to go home to Nigeria. Family emergency. Don't let her think I abandoned her. You're abandoning me. Joyce's tears fell freely now. I have to. If I stay, I'll destroy you. And I can't do that to someone She stopped, the words too big and too dangerous to say out loud. Someone you what? Someone I love. She walked to the door. Park Ji-hoon stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to stop her, but his daughter was asleep down the hall, and the empire his grandfather built was crumbling, and he didn't know how to choose between the woman who'd given him back his life and everything else he was supposed to protect. At the door, Joyce turned one last time. Take care of your daughter. Be the father she needs. That's all that matters. Then she was gone, and Park Ji-hoon was alone in his museum of a home, and somewhere deep in his chest, something shattered beyond repair. He swept everything off his desk in a rage, glass and metal clattering to the floor, and let himself break in a way he hadn't since the night his wife died. Morning came too soon. Yuna woke and ran to Joyce's room like she did every morning. Found it empty. Ran to the kitchen. Joyce's favorite mug was gone. Ran to her father's office and pounded on the door with her small fists. Park Ji-hoon opened it, his eyes red and raw. Yuna stared at him, and he watched comprehension dawn on her face. Watched her realize what he'd done. She opened her mouth and screamed, the first sound she'd made in 3 years. Not words, but pure anguish, a wounded animal noise that would haunt him forever. Then she ran to her room and started destroying everything, ripping drawings off walls, throwing toys, smashing anything breakable. Park Ji-hoon tried to enter, and she threw a lamp at him. He sat outside her locked door, head in his hands, listening to his daughter's world end for the second time, and knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the wrong choice. Day 38 brought a silence more terrifying than the screaming. Yuna stopped making sounds completely, stopped eating, stopped drawing, just stared at walls like she'd disappeared inside herself. Park Ji-hoon tried everything he could think of. He made her favorite foods and watched them go cold and untouched. He bought new toys that stayed in their boxes. He sat beside her bed and talked until his voice went hoarse, begging her to look at him, to scream at him, to do anything but this terrible nothing. She wouldn't even look at him anymore. Dr. Shin came for an emergency session, and her face when she saw Yuna made Park Ji-hoon's blood run cold. What happened? She asked, and he had to force the words out past the shame choking him. The nanny left. Dr. Shin's expression shifted from concern to something harder, almost angry. You mean the woman Yuna bonded with more than anyone since her mother died? The one she finally opened up to after 3 years of silence? And she left without saying goodbye? It's complicated. Mr. Park, do you understand what you've done? Yuna has already experienced one woman she loved disappearing from her life forever. Now she's experienced it again. You've just confirmed her worst fear, that people she loves will always leave. That opening her heart means inevitable pain. Park Ji-hoon felt like he'd been stabbed. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Dr. Shin stood, gathering her things. I can't help her anymore. Not until you fix what you broke. She left him sitting in his daughter's room, watching the small figure on the bed who wouldn't acknowledge his existence, and he understood with crushing clarity that he'd sacrificed the wrong thing. His company didn't matter. His reputation didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the 2 people he'd failed. Meanwhile, Joyce was living in a hostel in Itaewon that smelled like mold and old cooking oil, sharing a room with 3 other women, jumping every time her phone rang because the loan sharks had started calling from new numbers. She'd paid them what she owed, every last one from her month's salary, and now she had barely enough for food. She was applying to every job she could find, cleaning positions mostly, anything that would keep her visa valid for a few more weeks. Her foster sister video called from Lagos late one night, and Joyce tried to keep her voice steady, tried to pretend everything was fine, but her sister knew her too well. You sound sad, what's wrong? Joyce broke. The words poured out before she could stop them. I fell in love with a man I can't have and a child who isn't mine, and I had to leave them both, and I don't know how to breathe without them anymore. Then why did you leave? Because staying would have destroyed them. Who told you that? Him or you? Joyce had no answer. She lay awake that night staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if she'd made a mistake, wondering if love was supposed to feel this much like dying. Day 42, Madame Gomi-young arrived at the penthouse with an army. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, briefcases full of documents, and Chief Justice Kong, a family friend whose presence alone spoke volumes about the power she wielded. Park Ji-hoon met them in his office, his face carved from ice, but inside he was bracing for impact. Emergency custody petition, the lead lawyer announced, sliding documents across the desk. We're filing today. Your daughter has regressed significantly under your care. You maintain an inappropriate relationship with staff. You're emotionally unstable and prioritize business over your child's welfare. Mrs. Go, as maternal grandmother, is petitioning for full custody in the best interests of the minor child. Park Ji-hoon read through the documents, each word a knife. They had everything. Photos of him and Joyce at the market. Testimony from fired board members about his erratic behavior. Dr. Shin's notes about Yuna's regression. Even the nanny cam footage, edited to make innocent moments look suspicious. You can't do this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction because he knew she could. She was doing it right now. Korean family courts favor maternal relatives, Mr. Park. Especially when the father has proven himself unfit. Madame Go smiled, cold and victorious. You brought this on yourself. If you just fired that woman when I told you to, none of this would be necessary. Get out of my home. We'll see you in court. She stood, her lawyers following like well-trained dogs. And Mr. Park? When you lose, and you will lose, don't come crying to me. You chose that African woman over your own daughter. Live with the consequences. They left him sitting in the wreckage of his life, holding custody papers that might as well have been a death sentence. His lawyer called within the hour. We can fight this, but it'll take months and cost millions, and the publicity will be brutal. They'll drag your nanny through every piece of mud they can find. Every racist stereotype. It'll look like you chose sex over your daughter, and in Korean court, that's a death sentence for a custody case. What are my options? Settle. Give Madame Go extended custody, summers and alternating weeks. Or, his lawyer paused, make the nanny disappear. Publicly. Denounce the relationship. Prove you chose your daughter over her. Show the court you've come to your senses. Park Ji-hoon felt sick. Both options meant losing. Either he lost his daughter or he lost Joyce, and he'd already lost Joyce once and barely survived it. That night, a letter arrived for Yuna. Mrs. Kang brought it to Park Ji-hoon first, and he recognized Joyce's handwriting on the envelope. His hands shook as he brought it to his daughter's room. Yuna, he said softly. This came for you. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge him, but when he placed the envelope on her bed and left, he watched through the crack in the door as she slowly reached for it. The letter was short, written in English with little drawings in the margins. Dear Yuna, I'm so sorry I had to go. I didn't want to. Your daddy will explain when you're older. I want you to know you're so brave. Braver than anyone I've ever met. You helped me feel brave too. When you feel sad, remember, loving people who aren't here anymore doesn't mean you can't love people who are here. Your Yama loved you. Your daddy loves you. And I love you. Keep drawing. Keep being curious. Keep being you. When you're ready to talk again, your daddy will listen. He's been waiting to hear your voice for so long. Let him in. He needs you. Love, Auntie Joyce. Yuna read it once, twice, 17 times, memorizing every word, every loop of Joyce's handwriting, every tiny drawing. Then she folded it carefully, held it to her chest, and unlocked her door for the first time in 6 days. She walked to her father's office on silent feet. He was sitting at his desk, head in his hands, looking more broken than she'd ever seen him. She stood in the doorway, this tiny 6-year-old girl with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and whispered the first words she'd spoken in 3 years. I miss Joyce. Park Ji-hoon's head snapped up. He stared at his daughter like she'd performed a miracle, which maybe she had. His eyes filled with tears, and he opened his arms, and Yuna ran to him. They held each other and cried, his tall frame wrapped around her small one, both of them mourning the woman who'd saved them and then disappeared. Me too, baby, he whispered into her hair. Me too. Have you ever loved someone so much that losing them felt like losing a part of yourself? That's where Alexander is right now, and what he does next will change everything. Keep listening. Day 45, Park Ji-hoon walked into his board meeting and resigned. The words came out steady and clear despite the shocked faces around the table. I'm stepping down as CEO effective immediately. I'm appointing Ji-soo Park as interim CEO. I'll retain ownership but remove myself from operations. You can't be serious, one board member sputtered. I've never been more serious. My daughter needs me more than this company does, and I'm not sacrificing people I love for stock prices anymore. He stood, buttoned his jacket, looked each of them in the eye. You wanted me to choose. I'm choosing. He walked out and didn't look back. Day 46, he did something even more unprecedented. He called a press conference, his first in 4 years, and every major news outlet in Korea showed up. The room was packed with cameras and reporters, all of them hungry for scandal, for the ice prince to finally crack. Park Ji-hoon stood at the podium in a simple suit, no notes, no script, just raw honesty. For years ago I lost my wife, he began, his voice carrying across the silent room. I spent those years building walls, working until I couldn't feel anything. I failed as a father because I was too afraid to be human. The cameras flashed like lightning. Then Joyce Adeyemi walked into my home. She didn't fix my daughter, she allowed my daughter to heal. She didn't judge my grief, she held space for it. Korean society has called her inappropriate, a gold digger, a threat. But the only thing she threatened was my excuse to stay frozen. He paused, let the words sink in. I'm in love with her. A woman I've known for 6 weeks has reminded me what it feels like to be alive. If that makes me weak, I accept it. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras went wild. Park Ji-hoon raised his hand for silence. Madam Go-mi-young is suing for custody of my daughter, claiming I'm unfit because I fell in love with someone she deems unsuitable. But here's the truth. Yuna spoke for the first time in 3 years because of Joyce. She laughed. She left our house. She drew pictures without her dead mother in them. If that's damage, I don't want my daughter fixed. His voice broke slightly. Joyce left to protect me. But I don't want protection. I want her. Joyce, if you're watching, come home. Please. He walked off stage to chaos, reporters screaming questions he didn't answer. The broadcast went viral within minutes. Millions of views. Korean society split down the middle, older generation scandalized, younger generation calling him brave. Joyce was packing her few belongings in the hostel when the ajumma who ran the place burst into the room. The TV in the common area was on, and there was Park Ji-hoon's face, larger than life, saying her name. She dropped her bag and ran. She watched the entire press conference standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, other hostel residents gathering around her whispering. When it ended, she stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The ajumma touched her shoulder. That man just destroyed his reputation for you. I know. So, what are you doing here? Go. Joyce grabbed her bag and ran. Day 48, the courthouse was packed. Madam Go's legal team arrived in force, expensive suits and cold smiles, ready to eviscerate Park Ji-hoon's character. The judge was older, traditional, exactly the type who would side with a wealthy grandmother over a man who'd fallen for the help. The hearing began with Madam Go's lawyers painting Park Ji-hoon as unstable, obsessed, a man who'd replaced his wife with an uneducated foreign woman and traumatized his daughter in the process. They showed edited footage, presented twisted testimony, made Joyce sound like a predator and Park Ji-hoon like a fool. Then they called Dr. Shin, expecting her to confirm Yuna's regression as proof of Park Ji-hoon's incompetence. But Dr. Shin surprised them. Yuna made more progress in 6 weeks with Ms. Adeyemi than in 3 years of therapy with me. Her regression occurred because the one person who made her feel safe was suddenly removed without warning. That's not Ms. Adeyemi's fault. That's yours. She looked directly at Madam Go. You orchestrated her removal, and you're blaming Mr. Park for the consequences. The courtroom stirred. Madam Go's lawyer objected. The judge allowed Dr. Shin to continue. Children who've experienced trauma need consistency, safety, and adults who won't abandon them. Yuna found that with Ms. Adeyemi. Removing her was the worst thing anyone could have done. Then Yuna asked to testify. The judge seemed surprised but allowed it. Park Ji-hoon's heart hammered as he watched his daughter walk to the stand, so small and brave, her hand steady as she swore to tell the truth. The judge leaned forward, speaking gently in Korean. Yuna SSI, can you tell us who you want to live with? Yuna looked at her grandmother first, and for a moment Park Ji-hoon thought he'd lost. But then she looked at him, and her voice when she spoke was clear and strong. My daddy. Because he loves me even when I'm quiet. Even when I'm angry. Even when I break things. He doesn't try to fix me. He just stays. Would you ever sacrifice everything for someone you love, even if it meant losing everything else? Park Ji-hoon just did, and now his daughter is fighting back. Stay with us. The courtroom was dead silent. Madame Go's face had gone white. Yuna wasn't finished. And I want Joyce to come back. She's not my Yama. I know that. But she's my person. And Daddy's person. She turned to the judge, this 6-year-old girl who'd found her voice at exactly the right moment. Please don't take her away. Thank you, Yuna SSI, the judge said softly. You're very brave. Yuna walked back to her father, and he pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. The courtroom doors burst open. Joyce ran in, out of breath and disheveled, her bag still on her shoulder from the hostel. I'm sorry I'm late. There was traffic and She stopped, saw Park Ji-hoon holding Yuna, saw the judge staring at her, saw Madame Go's face twist with rage. Ms. Adeyemi, I presume, the judge said. You're willing to testify? Yes, Your Honor. Joyce walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Madame Go's lawyer circled like a shark. Ms. Adeyemi, isn't it true you've been in Korea less than 2 years? Yes. And you have no formal childcare credentials? Correct. And you owe significant debt to private lenders? I did. I paid it. The lawyer smiled, cold and sharp. So you're unqualified, were desperate for money, and happened to seduce one of Korea's wealthiest men. Quite convenient. I didn't seduce anyone. Joyce's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I loved him by accident. By accident? I wasn't supposed to fall in love with him. I tried not to. But he's a good man who's been punishing himself for 4 years for something that wasn't his fault. And his daughter is the bravest, strongest child I've ever met. Loving them wasn't a choice. It just happened. You expect us to believe, the lawyer started, but Joyce cut him off. I don't expect you to believe anything. But I'll tell you this. I left because I thought staying would hurt them. I was wrong. Love doesn't hurt people. Shame does. Fear does. Hiding does. And I'm done hiding. She looked directly at Madame Go. Ma'am, I'm sorry you lost your daughter. Truly. But taking Yuna from her father won't bring her back. It'll just make another child lose another parent. Madame Go's composure cracked, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. The judge had heard enough. Custody remains with Mr. Park. However, Madame Go will have visitation rights, 1 weekend per month supervised. Additionally, I'm ordering family therapy for all parties. He looked at Joyce and Park Ji-hoon. I don't care about your relationship status. What I care about is this child's welfare, and she just told me in her own words where she feels safe. Case closed. The gavel came down like thunder. Park Ji-hoon stood, pulled Yuna and Joyce into his arms, held them both while Madame Go's lawyers packed their briefcases in defeat. They'd won. Against every odd, every prejudice, every obstacle, they'd won. That evening, the 3 of them sat on the penthouse terrace, watching the sunset over Seoul, painting the Han River in shades of gold and rose. Yuna sat between them, drawing in her sketchbook, peaceful and content. Are you staying this time? Yuna asked Joyce without looking up from her drawing. Do you want me to? Forever. Joyce looked at Park Ji-hoon. He nodded, his eyes warm and full of everything he couldn't say in front of his daughter. Then yes, Joyce said. Forever. Yuna hugged her hard, then ran inside to get more colored pencils, leaving the adults alone. Ji-hoon turned to Joyce. I have 3 things to say. Okay. First, you're fired. Joyce blinked. What? I can't date an employee. Ethics issue. Second, I'm hiring you as Yuna's official guardian consultant. Salary, 200 million won annually. And third, he pulled out a small velvet box, opened it to reveal a ring that caught the sunset and threw rainbows. Alexander, we've known each other 7 weeks. I don't care. I've spent 4 years half alive. I'm not wasting another second. Marry me. Not now, whenever you're ready. 6 months, a year, 5 years. But give me something to hope for. Joyce was crying and laughing at the same time. You're insane. Completely. Is that a yes? Ask me again in 6 months. Is that when the answer will be yes? Joyce took the ring, slipped it on her finger where it fit perfectly. Probably. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as the city lights began to sparkle like stars, as Yuna watched from the window with the biggest smile on her face. It wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of everything that mattered. If love like this makes you believe in second chances, in fighting for what matters, in choosing happiness over fear, then you understand why this story needed to be told. Alexander chose love over empire. Joyce chose vulnerability over safety. Yuna chose to speak after 3 years of silence. And together, they became the family none of them knew they needed. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't who you expected. Sometimes healing happens when you stop running from pain and start running toward hope. This is their story, and it's just beginning. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as the city lights began to sparkle like stars, as Yuna watched from the window with the biggest smile on her face. Ji-hoon pulled back first, resting his forehead against Joyce's, both of them breathing hard, both of them grinning like fools. I love you, he whispered, the words coming easier now, like something that had been locked inside him for years, finally breaking free. I love you too, Joyce whispered back, and it felt like the most terrifying and most honest thing she'd ever said. Yuna burst back onto the terrace with her colored pencils, completely oblivious to the moment she'd interrupted, or maybe not oblivious at all, maybe perfectly aware and delighted by it. She settled back between them and resumed drawing, and Joyce saw what she was creating. 3 figures holding hands, 1 tall man, 1 woman with dark skin and curly hair, 1 small girl in the middle. Above them, a 4th figure drawn in lighter strokes, almost transparent, a woman with long hair watching over them all. Yuna had labeled it in careful English letters. My family. Joyce's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Alexander and saw his eyes were wet too. Yuna kept drawing, adding stars and hearts and flowers, humming a song Joyce had taught her from Nigeria, completely at peace in a way that felt like the most precious gift either adult had ever received. Mrs. Kang appeared in the doorway. Dinner is ready, she announced, but her voice was softer than usual, almost gentle. When Joyce met her eyes, the older woman smiled, actually smiled, and nodded once. Approval. Acceptance. Welcome to the family. They ate dinner together, the 3 of them plus Mrs. Kang, who Joyce insisted join them, and it felt like every dinner should feel warm and chaotic and full of laughter. Yuna told a story about a girl at school, using full sentences, her voice getting louder and more animated as she went. Alexander listened like she was reciting poetry, his face soft with wonder. Joyce caught him staring at her over Yuna's head more than once, and every time their eyes met, she felt that flutter in her stomach, that impossible lightness of being loved and being seen. After Yuna went to bed, after they'd tucked her in together and read her 3 stories because she kept asking for 1 more, Joyce and Alexander stood in the hallway outside her room, neither wanting the day to end. I need to tell you something, Alexander said, his voice serious enough that Joyce's heart skipped. I've been thinking about this since the courthouse. Okay, Joyce said carefully, trying not to panic. I want to bring your family here. Your foster father, your sisters, everyone. I want to sponsor their visas, set them up with housing, get your sisters enrolled in school. I know you send them money, but I want," he paused, searching for the right words. "I want you to have what you gave me. Your family back." Joyce couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was offering. "You don't have to decide now," he continued quickly, misreading her silence. "I just wanted you to know that I'm already working on it. I've hired immigration lawyers, started the paperwork. If you want them here, I can make it happen." "Alexander," Joyce finally managed, her voice breaking. "That's too much. It's not enough." He touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't know had fallen. "You sacrificed everything to save us. Let me give you something back." They stood there in the dim hallway, the weight of his offer settling between them like something sacred. Joyce thought about her sisters growing up in Seoul instead of Lagos, thought about her foster father finally having stability, thought about holiday dinners with everyone she loved in one place. It felt impossible. It felt like a dream. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, please." Alexander pulled her close, and they stood there holding each other while the city hummed 60 stories below, while Yuna slept peacefully for the first time in years, while their future unfolded in front of them like a map to somewhere beautiful. 14 months passed in a blur of beautiful chaos. Yuna started second grade at an international school where half her classmates were Korean and half were from everywhere else, and she thrived in the mix of languages and cultures. She made friends easily now, invited them over for playdates where Joyce made jollof rice and Mrs. King made tteokbokki, and the children ate everything without caring about where it came from. She talked constantly, making up for 3 years of silence with endless questions and stories and observations about the world. Joyce's foster family arrived in Seoul 6 months after the proposal, and Joyce sobbed so hard at the airport that security almost got involved. Her foster father, a quiet man in his 50s who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, stood in the arrivals terminal looking overwhelmed and grateful. Her sisters, now 15 and 12, clung to her like they'd never let go. Alexander had set them up in an apartment in the same building, 3 floors down, close enough to visit daily, but far enough for privacy. He'd enrolled the girls in Yuna's school, found her foster father a position in Park Industries facilities management, made sure they had everything they needed to build a life in Korea. The wedding was set for a Saturday in May, when Seoul was warm but not yet humid, when the cherry blossoms had finished falling, but the city was still bright with spring. They kept it small, immediate family only, which still meant nearly 50 people once you counted Alexander's cousins and business partners he couldn't avoid inviting, and Joyce's entire foster family and half of Yuna's school friends, because she'd insisted. The ceremony took place at a private garden venue in Gangnam, with the Han River visible in the distance. They'd hired a wedding planner who specialized in fusion ceremonies, someone who understood how to blend Korean and Nigerian traditions without making either feel like an afterthought. The result was something entirely their own, something that belonged to no single culture, but to the family they were creating. Have you ever watched 2 different worlds collide and create something more beautiful than either could be alone? That's what this wedding was, and that's what their love had become. Joyce wore a custom hanbok in deep purple silk, the traditional Korean wedding dress, but on her head she wore a geli, the Nigerian head wrap, tied in elaborate folds of gold fabric that caught the light. Alexander wore a traditional black suit, but over it he draped an agbada, the flowing Nigerian ceremonial robe that Joyce's foster father had brought from Lagos. They looked like they belonged to everywhere and nowhere, like they'd invented their own country where love was the only citizenship that mattered. The ceremony began with the Korean paibik, the traditional bows to the elders. Alexander and Joyce knelt before his parents' memorial tablets, bowed deeply, received blessings from his living relatives. Then they performed the Nigerian wine-carrying ceremony, where Joyce carried a cup of palm wine through the guests until she found Alexander and offered it to him, the symbolic choosing of her husband. He drank, she drank, and the two families erupted in cheers, Korean ajumas ululating alongside Nigerian aunties in a sound that could have shattered glass. Yuna was the flower girl, wearing a miniature hanbok that matched Joyce's, her hair braided with gold ribbon. But her real role came during the vows, when she stepped forward with a piece of paper she'd written herself. The officiant, a bilingual minister who'd agreed to this wildly untraditional ceremony, nodded for her to speak. Yuna's voice was clear and strong, no trace of the silent girl she'd been. "Joyce Uni, you're not my Yama, and I'm glad because that means I got to choose you. Yama had to love me, but you loved me even when I was mean and scary and locked you out. You taught me that having two people love you doesn't mean betraying anyone. You taught me that being happy doesn't mean forgetting people who are gone. You're not replacing anyone. You're just," she paused, searching for the right word, "you're just Joyce. And that's perfect." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Joyce was crying so hard she could barely see, and Alexander's hand in hers was shaking. Yuna folded her paper carefully, walked to Joyce, and hugged her legs. Joyce picked her up, held her close, and whispered thank you into her hair. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. Korean traditional music played alongside Afrobeats, and the dance floor became a beautiful mess of people trying to learn each other's moves, elderly Korean relatives attempting to follow Nigerian dance steps while Joyce's sisters taught them, laughing so hard they could barely stand. The food was a fusion feast, bulgogi next to jollof rice, kimchi next to moin moin, traditional Korean rice cakes next to Nigerian puff puff. Madame Gomi Young sat at a table near the back, stiff and formal in her traditional hanbok, clearly uncomfortable but undeniably present. She'd arrived exactly on time, brought a traditional gift of gold jewelry that Joyce knew cost more than most people's cars, and sat through the ceremony without a single smile. But she was there. That alone felt like a miracle. During the reception, she approached Joyce while Alexander was dancing with Yuna. The older woman looked even more uncomfortable up close, like every word was being dragged out of her by force. "I don't approve of this marriage," she said without preamble. Joyce braced herself for whatever was coming next. "But my granddaughter is happy. Genuinely happy. She pauses at my house now and tells me about school and her friends and you. She's not the ghost child anymore." Madame Go's face tightened like the next words physically hurt. "That matters more than my pride. Take care of them." It wasn't warm. It wasn't acceptance, not really. But it was acknowledgement, and for Madame Go, that was everything. Joyce nodded, understanding what the woman couldn't say, that grief made people cruel sometimes, that protecting the memory of someone you loved could become a weapon, that letting go was the hardest thing. "I will," Joyce promised. "And you're welcome to visit Yuna anytime. We're not trying to keep you away." Something flickered in Madame Go's eyes, surprise maybe, or gratitude she couldn't voice. She nodded once and returned to her table, and Joyce felt Alexander's arm slide around her waist. "That looked intense," he murmured into her ear. "She's trying. That's enough." During the dinner speeches, Alexander stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. "Joyce," he began, and she saw his hand tremble slightly as he set down his champagne. "For years ago, I stopped believing in second chances. I thought I'd used mine up, that life had given me everything good it was going to give, and I'd destroyed it. Then you walked into my home and proved me wrong." The room was silent, everyone leaning forward. "You didn't just save my daughter, you saved me. You taught us both that loving someone new doesn't betray the people we've lost, it honors them. Every day with you feels like waking up from a nightmare I thought would last forever." He turned to face her fully. "I don't deserve you, but I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you've given us." Joyce was crying again, and around the room tissues appeared in dozens of hands. But Alexander wasn't finished. "One more thing," he said, and gestured to the doors. They opened, and Joyce's foster father walked in, followed by her two sisters, and for a confused moment Joyce thought they were doing another entrance. But then she saw the suitcases, saw the permanent resident cards in her father's hand, saw her sisters' faces glowing with excitement. What? Joyce started, but couldn't finish. They're not visiting, Alexander said. They're staying. Permanent visas. Your sisters are enrolled in international school starting next semester. Your father has a full-time position with Park Industries with benefits and housing. I know I should have asked first, but he paused, his voice thick. I wanted to give you back what you gave me. Your family. Joyce couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Just ran to them, crashing into her foster father's arms while her sisters wrapped around her waist, all of them crying and laughing and speaking over each other in Igbo and English and broken Korean. Her father held her face in his calloused hands. My daughter, he said in Igbo, look at you. You did it. You survived. You found love. You built a family. Your mother would be so proud. Joyce collapsed into sobs. Alexander appeared beside her, and her foster father pulled him into the embrace too, this tall Korean man who'd given his foster daughter everything, and they stood there in the middle of the reception hall while two families watched and wept and celebrated. Can you imagine finding someone who doesn't just accept your past, but helps you heal it? Someone who sees your broken pieces and calls them beautiful? That's what real love looks like. The party lasted until midnight, dancing and eating and toasting until everyone's voices were hoarse. Yuna fell asleep in a chair around 10, her flower crown askew, her face peaceful. Alexander carried her to the car while Joyce said goodbye to what felt like 100 people, collecting hugs and blessings in 2 languages. 6 months after the wedding, Joyce stood in the kitchen of their penthouse making breakfast, her hands moving through the familiar motions of cracking eggs and chopping vegetables. She was showing now, for months pregnant, her belly a small proud curve under Alexander's oversized shirt that she'd stolen from his closet. Yuna sat at the island doing homework, occasionally asking questions in a mix of Korean and English that Joyce had learned to follow. It was Yuna's 8th birthday, and the apartment would be full of screaming children in approximately 3 hours. Joyce was making both jollof rice and kimchi fried rice, fusion food for a fusion family. Mrs. Kang was helping, the two of them moving around each other with practiced ease, no longer employer and employee, but something closer to friends. Alexander appeared in the doorway in his weekend clothes, jeans and a sweater, his hair still messy from sleep. He looked younger like this, softer, the ice prince fully melted. He came up behind Joyce and wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands settling on her small bump. How are my girls this morning? He murmured into her neck. We're good, Joyce said, leaning back into him. Hungry. Always hungry. That's because she's going to be a foodie like her Yuna announced without looking up from her homework. I'm teaching her to love jollof already. Alexander laughed, the sound still new enough after years of silence that it made Joyce's heart squeeze. He kissed the side of Joyce's neck, then moved to help Yuna with her math, and Joyce watched them, this man and this girl who'd both been so broken, now whole and happy and hers. The birthday party was chaos in the best way. 20 children running through the penthouse, a mix of Korean and international students from Yuna's school, all of them speaking 3 languages at once and not caring when they couldn't understand each other. Joyce's sisters supervised the games while her foster father helped Alexander set up the karaoke machine. Mrs. Kang and Madame Go, in a development no one had predicted, stood together arranging the dessert table, the older woman's presence at a children's birthday party a sign of how much had changed. Later, after the guests had left and the apartment was destroyed but quiet, the core family gathered in the living room. Joyce's foster family, Alexander, Yuna, Mrs. Kang, who'd become too much a part of things to be excluded. They were passing around leftover cake and telling stories when Yuna tugged on Joyce's sleeve. Can I show you something? Of course. Yuna led her to the wall in the hallway, the one that had once been filled only with photos of hygiene. It was different now, expanded, a gallery of past and present. Hae-jin's pictures were still there, prominent and honored, but alongside them were new photos. The wedding. Yuna's first day at her new school. Joyce's family arriving at the airport. Alexander and Joyce laughing at the market. Yuna's 7th birthday. Random Tuesday dinners. 1,000 small moments that added up to a life. See? Yuna said, pointing. Yama's still here, but we're here too. Everyone fits. Joyce knelt down, pulling Yuna into a hug, this brilliant, brave girl who understood things most adults couldn't grasp. You're right, she whispered. Everyone fits. Alexander joined them in the hallway, wrapping his arms around both of them, and they stood there looking at the wall of memories, past and present woven together, grief and joy sharing space, everything that had been and everything still to come captured in frames. What are you thinking? Joyce asked him. That I spent 4 years building walls to survive, and you walked in and turned them into windows. He kissed the top of her head. That I'm the luckiest man alive. That I can't wait to meet our daughter and watch Yuna teach her everything she knows. That this, he gestured to the photos, to the messy apartment full of the evidence of life being lived, to the family gathered in the next room, to the future growing inside Joyce. This is what happiness looks like. Joyce leaned into him, one hand on her belly where their daughter was dancing, the other holding Yuna close, and felt so full of contentment she thought she might burst. Behind them, laughter erupted from the living room, her sisters and Alexander's cousins, her foster father and Mrs. Kang, different worlds colliding and somehow making sense. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't who you expected, Joyce thought. Sometimes healing happens when you stop trying to erase the past and start making room for the future. Sometimes family isn't about blood or borders or fitting into boxes someone else built. Sometimes love means honoring what was while choosing what could be. This was their story. This was their family. This was their beginning. And it was more beautiful than anything Joyce could have imagined when she'd signed that contract 14 months ago, desperate and alone and sure she was just surviving. She hadn't just survived. She'd lived. She'd loved. She'd found home in the last place she'd expected, in the arms of a broken man and his silent daughter who'd needed her just as much as she'd needed them. The city sparkled beyond the windows, Seoul at night looking like stars had fallen to earth. Inside, warmth and laughter and the messy, beautiful truth of family. Joyce closed her eyes and breathed it in, this moment, this life, this love that had saved them all.